Good afternoon, everybody. This is Farooq Nair, a member of siberX's Security Advisory Committee and lead on the CISO Advisory Committee. We are on home stretch now, almost towards the end of an exciting and completely engaging conversations throughout the 2 days of siberXchange online summit. We had some really good discussions, good keynotes, and good panel discussions. But of course, of all these discussions, one of the sessions which I am really privileged to be a part of, and of course, which I was really looking forward to, was this one. And there are lots of reasons for that. So it's a privilege and honor for me to introduce the next speaker for this keynote as part of the Smart Cities X stream. Today's speaker is Dr. Naweed Syed. And I hope the next 1 minute would be good enough to talk about his profile and his accomplishments, but I will just start off and I will try to do as much justice as I can. So Dr. Naweed Syed is a professor and scientific director of Alberta Children's Hospital Research Institute, Cummings School of Medicine at the University of Calgary. He was also the postdoctoral program director, Office of the Vice President Research from 2012 to 2016, and a special advisor to the Vice President Research and a chief scientist at the Constructive Destructive Lab Global, and is the Peak Scholar at the University of Calgary. He has many accolades and degrees to his name. He completed his master's from the University of Karachi in Pakistan in '84 and a PhD in neurophysiology from the University of Leeds in UK. And of course, after a 3-year postdoctoral training at the University of Calgary between '88 and '91, he was subsequently appointed as an assistant professor in the Faculty of Medicine. Dr. Syed has served as a department head for the cell biology and anatomy for 10 years and was the research director for the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. Dr. Syed has led several major research and academic initiatives for the university, ranging from biomedical engineering to genome sequencing, etc. If I go through the list of awards and medals and honors which Dr. Naweed Syed has received throughout the years, I think that will take lots of time, but just to highlight a few, Dr. Syed was awarded and has been identified and recognized as 150 Canadian innovators in lieu of Canada's 150th birthday a few years ago. And of course, since he's from Pakistan, he was also honored in Pakistan. And in 2016, Dr. Syed was awarded Tamgha-e-Imtiyaz, the Medal of Excellence, the highest civilian award for research and innovation. He's also got awards, and of course, in the US, which are the Alfred Sloan Fellowship in the US, Parker B. Francis Fellowship, and of course, lots of things in Canada, Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research Scholar, Senior Scholar, Scientist Awards, and the list goes on and on. Dr. Syed's team was the first to develop a bionic hybrid which enabled direct dialogue between brain cells and the silicon chip. This study was highlighted in the Time magazine and on the Discovery Channel, Globe and Mail, etc., and many other newspapers and magazines. Dr. Syed has published extensively over 140 papers in peer-reviewed scientific journals, including Nature of Science, Neuron, and the Journal of Neuroscience. He holds multiple research grants from the Canadian Institute of Health Research and the Natural Science Engineering Council of Canada. He's also been a co-PI and CHR on CFI team grants. Dr. Syed also served on several national and international grant panels and is a member of several scientific advisory boards. And Dr. Syed has trained over 57 PhD and MSc students and 20 postdoctoral scholars, and has given several hundred lectures at universities and conferences in many countries of the world. It gives me a great privilege and an honor to introduce Dr. Naweed Syed as a speaker to speak on invasive technologies and municipalities. Dr. Naweed Syed, over to you.
Thank you, Farooq, for that wonderful and generous introduction. I think, the topic, and I'm also grateful to siberX team. I think it's really phenomenal team, the way you guys have really conducted the entire operation. I think it really kudos to all of you. I mean, the invasive technology in municipality is not my area, but I couldn't turn down people like, Farooq, Ali, Zainab, and a whole crew. I said, okay, I will do this. But I think what I will do today is to maybe touch on these invasive and non-invasive technologies as to where we are today, where we are heading in the future, and what are really the roadblocks that we need to overcome. And there are so many different things, but I'll try to really connect them. But the idea really is to get your mind off thinking of COVID-19 and then think something really interesting and then exciting. So I think when you think about brain or invasive technologies, you know, this area is so complicated, just like the way the brain is complicated. And I will walk you through a few of these that are currently being used and like, as I said, in the future as well. So I am from Calgary. It's looking really beautiful outside. I don't know what it is like down Toronto and elsewhere. And the beautiful thing about our city is that it is located in the foothills of Canadian mountains. And the reason I'm showing this picture of, you know, daytime as well as the nighttime is this is what really brought all the innovations that we are going to talk about. The globalization or the global village and the urbanization, which is the municipalities, where everybody gathered around to think and to create really innovative technologies. We created hubs. So from 1980 onwards, you think about the globalization increased our really wealth, you know, GDP from almost 40 to 60%. And this globalization was really an important player. And the municipalities were central because this is where all the academic research institutes were established and funded. And that the cities or the urbanization brought these brilliant scientists and scholars, for example, to Alberta and other big places to be able to really create these novel technologies. And what has happened as a result of these technologies is that we have now the ability to take blood from a pregnant mother, and we could analyze using genomics techniques whether the baby that is yet to be born will have any genetic defects in the years to come. And this is really a powerful technique, that technology that has emerged from urbanization, or what we call the municipalities making research as their top priority. So you can actually take these blood samples, you can analyze them, and you can predict whether the baby that is yet to be born in the future will have any genetic defects. But what can you do with that? So I think the other interesting and important thing is that you could use these CRISPR technology, which is the gene editing techniques that can make targeted modification to the defective DNA. If the part of the DNA is missing, you could actually insert healthy DNA and delete that DNA even before the baby is developed or the fetus is developed in utero. So I think similarly, we can track many genetic defects, inherited defect, using these technologies that have sort of made many people uncomfortable. And I think one of the point was that at some time point, people thought that this genetic approach could be used to cure disease, but then there were some sidetracks. And I think, you know, one of the approach was that somebody did some experiments they found and asked them a specific question, how spiritual you are. And it turns out that they came up with the idea that there is, you know, Dean Hammer's work from US, that there is a specific molecule which is encoded by biogenic amines such as serotonin and dopamine neurotransmitter. They call it VMAT. And they said that that particular gene that gives you pleasure or gives you really superstitious or supernatural thought process is what they called as a God gene. And I'm mentioning this here, it's important because this particular problem has come to haunt us as we design technologies and strategies to combat you know, the coronavirus. And so the other really approach is that these technologies have allowed us to tackle diseases for which we had no previously any cure. We can now get our own immune system to attack these cancers, for example, or the tumors in the body. And similarly, we design oncolytic viruses. And this is where, again, the coronavirus comes into picture, that these oncolytic viruses are the ones that we work in the laboratory and to modify them and then engineer them in such a way that they could go and specifically locate the tumor cells and target them and kill them. And this has also given the idea that maybe the coronavirus was something that the scientists were playing in the laboratory, and it actually escaped, and it's causing all this chaos. So I think, you know, these technologies that we work with, of course, they have very powerful tools, but there is also an opportunity that they could also get out of our control. We have in Calgary also, our Dr. Garnet Sutherland was the first to develop the intraoperative MRI and this robotic surgeries whereby you can actually use a robot which can go inside the magnet, and the robot is made out of titanium. The robot can go inside the magnet and it can actually perform surgeries live by acquiring live images. And this is really very, very powerful technique that has been developed here in Calgary. And the idea is that one could actually operate on people while making live MRI images, and the surgeon being in a completely different room with full screen, and then looking at very subtle parts of the brain or the tumor, avoiding all major arteries using these sophisticated joystick controlled tools and gadgets. So these hybrid operating rooms have become really now are becoming the norm, thanks to the technology and technological advances, where a surgeon in a very different country or a city could perform surgery using partly half machine and half human expertise to be able to really perform all of these surgeries. So I think, once again, the take-home really message is that these technologies came about and then advanced our healthcare system and our thinking about the healthcare system because of urbanization, where municipalities played significant roles. This is what your future doctor would really look like if the sciences continued to proceed in the future.
It takes a moment for the unthinkable to become reality. In the near future, tragedy may come with new choices. Imagine you've been in a car crash that killed your daughter.
Is she okay? Is she okay?
Or has it?
She's breathing. She's breathing.
Hey.
Is she okay?
Time of death, 9:17. Your daughter's brain was not impacted by the accident. If you wish to scan her brain for digitization and upload, you have approximately 5 minutes.
Do it.
Now imagine the power you wield when you can order a digital copy of your daughter's brain. And do you know what comes next?
Hi, Dad.
One day delivered to your doorstep is an artificially intelligent android that will act, look, emote, just like your daughter. Every memory from birth on will remain intact, but she'll also be a walking computer with access to all the world's knowledge. This is what your world will look like. This is the future of artificial intelligence. It's the deep future. Your body, gone. You're all computer, all the time.
Hello there. May I ask your name?
Hi there, my name is Ignacio.
It's nice to meet you, Ignacio. So, what country are you from?
I'm from Canada.
It's pretty cold there, eh?
Meet Erika the android. She or it, depending on who you ask, is one of the most sophisticated humanoids ever designed. And she's giving us a glimpse of what a year-million AI might look like.
Modern computers are adding machine. They add very fast, giving the illusion that they're thinking.
So really, the take-home message and the reason for showing these two clips is that this is what we were dreaming. This is what we have started to think about using artificial intelligence, and can we reach a point of singularity whereby we are really connected to robots and then also to machines. And what artificial intelligence, how it could really change the world, how it could serve humanity, as well as really advancing our intellectuals and outputs. But what happened then came coronavirus. So all the funding that is really given to develop these novel, interesting, futuristic ideas, because if we start dreaming about these things, we can actually make them realize. But all of a sudden, whenever an accident catches us or pandemic catches us, we are taken by surprise. And I think all the civilized and the rich nations were really shocked when coronavirus showed up. And this has really impacted research funding going into those creating those brain-machine interfaces or hybrid technologies. And we are more focusing on these technologies. So I will reverse back to where we are. So the coronavirus, we know that the infections and vaccines, the infections, people who are infected, the question is, how can we track them? Now there are Android, there are many other devices that, for example, in Alberta, your cell phone is capable of recognizing people who have really either been cleared or who have been infected. So whenever they come in close contact, you get actually a warning signal. So these are non-invasive technologies, but there are other invasive ways of tracking it as well. So one of the idea that came, and the reason for this conspiracy, is that people thought that you could take these viruses, these vaccines, you can design them, and you capsulate them, put them in a little capsule, and then have those nanoparticles which can actually glow in your body, and they will tell you whether the person or individual has been vaccinated or not. And you can also track them, quite significantly. And that created lots of controversy, a lot of issues. But when you think about these radio frequency identifiers, they are really tiny little chips. They could hold up to, very limited amount of information. You could use, an individual can use this technology to inject these capsules inside your really thumb, and they can sit there, and they could have really any particular data or information about person or individual, tracking them. And because they are also capable of really delivering different compounds, that has created a lot of controversy whether these people who are getting vaccinated, they are also being tracked, and it could cause all kind of chaos. But the idea, when the technology was developed by Kevin Warwick in the United Kingdom, was the idea was that you could put your passport information, your credit card information, and if you are going through a transporter, it can read or pay your bill, or can open the door, or could do simple tasks. But you need to be in the close proximity and only a few less than a meter or so away. But these technologies create fear in people's mind that if the vaccine trackers are delivered this way, or if people can be tracked, but they can also deliver gene using the technology that I mentioned earlier to really alter people's brain. So this has really an interesting application, because all of a sudden a non-invasive approach becomes highly invasive. And this has created fear along with the coronavirus. And the fear is really a result of threat or impending danger. The danger is real. We know that this is definite, and then we could really have an immediate reaction to it too. And there is a clear object of fear and threat, and one could actually prepare themselves, like this poor penguin knows this real threat in front. But in addition to this fear that economy or economical crisis, and then deurbanization that is on its way, and deglobalization on its way that we see in the future to come, it has also created anxiety. And anxiety is, if you look at this penguin, it's got no idea what this ice, chipping or cracking ship is doing to it. It has no idea what it is going to do and what the potential threat is. So anxiety is really the result of perceived threat or danger a diffused, very unpleasant, vague sense of apprehension, which most people are really facing. And this really impacts our brain. And this is where I will focus most of my talk as to how can we really mitigate these kinds of fear and anxiety, which results into paranoia, which results into depression. Because if we lost this wealth, which is our mental faculties, it doesn't matter how purely or well our municipalities and our economies are doing. So I think the brain and mental health component is most pivotal, that we need to invoke all the possible technologies to preserve it. And that could happen by altering our thoughts. So if we actually alter our thoughts, these thoughts lead to, to our feelings, and the feelings will alter our behavior, and our behavior will then hit back onto our thoughts. And this vicious cycle will continue. And what will happen is that if we are not creative, we will not be innovative. We will be depressed. We will think that, nothing is really matter. And this would alter our behavior and throws the humanity back into really the cave times. I think this is really the major threat that I see personally, that if we have stopped really thinking and imagining and pushing for those technologies, that will really come to our rescue in the future. So the coronavirus, may harm our lungs, but the potential target is eventually the brain. And I'll show you the moderate levels of fear and stress are good for us. And this is the amygdala, which is the low part of your brain, what we call the reptilian brain. And this is important for us to evaluate and respond to a particular threat. But if this system is put in hyper alert, what it does is that it will cause either paralysis, of fear, of fight, of flight responses. And this is really not really good for us. So many of these technologies that people need to now develop is to really think about how to cope with all of this. But brain, as you all know, is extremely complex. We don't know how it functions. And we also don't know how to fix it when things go wrong. The question that I posed earlier, can biological intelligence be simulated by super intelligence? So the brain functions that we may lose to this fear and anxiety, could this be overcome by using artificial intelligence? And then what will happen if we reach the point of singularity once everything is over? So the most important question really is that this squishy stuff that you see called brain, the question is, how does it work? And can it be really connected with machines so we can really overcome any of the shortcomings that we have? So when you think about the brain is actually very complex. It's got tens of billions of brain cells, and each and every brain cell is so complex that if you were to take a single brain cell the size of a soccer ball, you can fill a huge auditorium with these dendrites, which are the branches, antennas that receive this information. And these brain cells are connected with one another with trillions of synaptic connections. They are more than stars in the galaxies. And these synapses are the contact point between two brain cells through which they exchange their information. And these then synapses will form what we call neuronal circuits. And these neuronal circuits are not hardwired. They are highly plastic, they're highly changed and highly malleable. They can alter all the time. And I think this is where the current coronavirus is affecting and altering our brain circuits in a way that we are really going through apprehension and losing all of our faith and then the things that we really want to do. So when you think about brain cells, it's very complex, as I pointed out. They're connected through special synapses. So if you want to understand how brain functions, you really are to connect it with machines or to develop technologies, you have to acquire the ability to record from large networks of brain cells. And that has really not been done. I recorded during my PhD from 12 cells, and I thought I walked in water, only to realize that I was really the dumbest person on the planet. And then also, if your brain cell is damaged, either due to stroke, trauma, injury, Parkinson, anxiety, depression, that brain cell is kaput, it's gone, because natural replacement of damaged brain tissue doesn't occur. How do you regain that lost brain function? That is actually a big, huge issue in the field that we, particularly my lab, was interested in dealing with. So your brain is the fastest growing organ in the body. There are 30,000 synapses or neurons added every second. And anything that will affect a pregnant mother, either a fear, anxiety, or depression, will render these functional circuits compromised in the brain. And as I said, they form at such an enormous rate and level that it is often difficult to really track these changes. And many of these connections in your brain, they are really nurtured or either by nature or nurtured by experiences. So if you think about, a kitty cat that has never confronted a mouse, or a rat has never confronted that kitty cat, whenever it will see it, it will actually freeze. So those are innate responses built into the circuit. Everything else is actually nurtured. The nurture plays a very important role. So I think in light of these genetic and the environmental perturbations, our brain circuits can alter permanently. And this is something that we really need to watch out, and how these brain networks are impacted. So I give you an example here, 2 brain scans of 3 years old kids. To my right is the extreme neglected child, and this is a normal child growing up. And you can see the size of the brain is very different. And then if you look at the neglected child, there are huge gaps in the area where the brain cells are not making those connections. And this child will never be normal. So I think, it's really important that when we look at any of these world scenarios, even for our younger children, they are the ones that are really the most vulnerable. And then to figure out how brain really functions is that to be able to really understand what it is. But, we don't really know much about the brain. We don't have built-in emotional circuits that would allow us to be able to respond to. And so we just make guesses, and these guesses create hallucinations, and these hallucinations will lead to really mental disorders as we go around. So let me test your skills. Tell me, what do you actually see? And you have not seen this image before, so your brain is going bananas trying to figure out what this is. Pay good attention. This is a best example of your experiential blindness, because you have not seen this before. You're completely blind to this particular image. And so your brain is just making guesswork. So many of these brain-machine interfacing technologies actually try to crack that guesswork as to how it works. Let me show you what it actually is. And now that you have seen this image, you say, oh, I got it. And then if I were to really go back, you will have no problem seeing that image in your mind, because you're no longer experientially blind. Now let me show you another picture here. Your brain will be now going and trying to figure out, but because you have not seen, your brain makes a guesswork. And guess what this image is? That. And if you have seen it, your brain is no longer experientially blind, and it actually can be able to see this image. Now, I will also show you an interesting image that allows us the ability to be able to fool your brain completely. And we can actually make it full. So in this particular case, you could see that there is a rubber hand here. This individual cannot see his own hand, which is his left hand. But the moment the right hand is stroked, we also stroke his real hand and then the plastic hand at the same spot. So soon his brain will begin to imagine that this particular hand actually belongs to this individual. So watch what actually happens.
Practice. Here you can see the fake hand focusing on it. There's the real hand not focusing on it, simultaneous stroking. And there are various ways you can test it. Practice. Here you can see the fake hand focusing on it. There's the real hand not focusing on it, simultaneous stroking. And there are various ways you can test it.
So what this really tells you is that you can actually fool your brain. So when people lose their arms, you still have phantom pain or phantom limb in your head. Can you actually tap into those information processing mechanisms of the brain and then make your brain believe that part of the body is actually your own part of your body? So those are more into invasive technologies, and I'll show you that we can actually fly a drone by just thinking about it, just using the brain. We can also drive a car by just thinking about it, and based on these really simple capabilities of the brain. And in some cases, it looks like really dumb. And in the other cases, it really becomes very, very, very sharp and sophisticated. But to be able to either create brain-machine interfaces or to create invasive technologies, it's really important that we tap into the information processing capabilities of the brain and try to figure out how that works. And that was really the grand challenge that my research laboratory took over, to figure out how this squishy stuff brain actually works. So we thought that can we actually use a semiconductor chip that we designed, and then we pair it with the brain in such a way that we make the chip biocompatible using all the chemical engineering techniques. We plant the chip inside the brain, and in such a way that the brain will recognize the chip as if it is part of another part of the brain, and then it communicates with it in a two-way link whereby a machine can talk to brain, and then the brain can talk back to machine. So, you know, the idea really is that in current situation, when people have Parkinson's disease, they have really bad tremors, they don't respond to drugs, surgeon goes in and inserts a deep brain stimulation electrode, and then the patient can stimulate that electrode. These are invasive technologies, but can stimulate that electrode, and it creates a current, and then stimulate those neurons, and it releases dopamine, which alleviates some of the symptoms. We also have technology where we can detect epileptic seizures in patients who are really seizing, but there's nothing you could do. So what we wanted to do was to create a stimulator which is based on capacitive current to stimulate a brain cell, whereby brain cell talks to a semiconductor chip can talk to brain cell. The brain cell stimulates its partner, and then we have a transistor underneath that picks up the signal. So you complete the loop whereby an electrical device, computer chip can talk to brain, and then the brain cells can talk back to. So the idea is that after stroke or injury, if the part of the brain is damaged, you can actually bypass it using these semiconductor technologies, which I'm going to show you. So the idea really is to have this chip connected to computer. And what we do is that we create a capacitive charge underneath the brain cell. We stimulate that brain cell by just passing electric current. The brain cell will fire. And now if this brain cell were connected with another brain cell, the capacitor would activate this neuron, and then the impulse travels along the path, it stimulates the other brain cell, and the transistor underneath picks up the signal. So you complete a loop whereby an electrical device or a semiconductor chip can talk to brain cells, and brain cells can talk back to. So of course, to really keep, how do you do these experiments? You can't do these experiments you know, on the human brain. So we had to develop a out of brain situation whereby we created this incubator. This incubator can provide all the things that your brain will supply brain cells, from oxygen to CO2 monitor, to temperature, to humidity, everything else is contained. And we put these brain cells inside on the semiconductor chip. We can keep them for weeks and months alive, and you will see that these cells start to grow. And as they come together, one cell will tell the other one, hey, what's happening? How you doing? And then, you know, that particular conversation we can really crack. And you can see how these networks are developing. This allows us to really tap into information processing capabilities that allows these brain networks to come together. And we can really grow these cells just like a semiconductor computer chip. They will love and hug and kiss. And this allows us to be able to really tap onto these brain cells, and we can create these networks of brain cells. And interesting thing is actually we can also now create a flight simulator that can fly a plane from Calgary and land it in Toronto or somewhere else. So those are really still in very early stages, but the idea really is that the question is, can it be done? And the answer is now beginning to appear that yes, actually it can be done. So we can monitor the activities of several 100,000 neurons real time on a chip for weeks to months. And this allows us to be able to really monitor their activities and their behavior. But the question still is that these brain cells are dissociated. So we take them from rat, we put them on a culture, they grow and they build their own networks, and these networks may not be natural. So what we have also done is that we have really taken the slices of intact brain. So we cut the slice off, We put it on the chip, and you can actually see here that we can record or monitor spontaneously occurring seizures in a tissue with really exquisite accuracy. So this allows us to be able to monitor seizures in the intact slice. But then the next step was that, yes, but these are only those brain cells that are in immediate contact with chip, but brain is three-dimensional. How would you tackle those brain cells that are in different areas and are not contacting your chip? So what we done for that is that we developed another technique, which we call photoconductive stimulation. We grow these brain cells on silicon wafers. We label them with a fluorescent dye, where whenever brain cell is active, it will glow up like a Christmas tree, and we can actually pick up the activity of those brain cells by just firing a single laser through our microscopes. And so when you look at these neurons, they really light up like a Christmas tree. They fire these beautiful impulses. And now we have the ability to monitor millions of brain cells. Now we are getting somewhere. And the idea is to take this technology into the future, whereby you have people who lost their arms or legs. If we were to plant these chips inside the brain, as the visual cortex of this monkey makes a judgment as to where the food palette is, and the visual cortex talks to the sensory motor cortex, and if the sensory motor cortex had a chip planted into, that will pick up the activity. But because you have designed this chip yourself, you can now pair it or connect it with an artificial prosthetic device, such as artificial limb. And then so that people will be able to really connect and control these robotic arms or robotic legs by using their own mind and their own brain. So we wanted to take this technology to the next level. And the idea was that, can we use this chip using more invasive approach? And if we were to plant our chip inside the human brain, can we detect epileptic seizures? So to give you an idea, the children or grown-ups, when they don't respond to epilepsy, they have to go in the hospital where they are implanted with these surface electrodes on their scalp. They have to stay in the hospital for 10 days, attached with a 30-foot cable. And the information that comes out is really not that accurate. So we used a chip, a three-dimensional chip, which is MR compatible. And we're really proposing to plant this chip inside the human brain and make it completely wireless. So this will be an invasive approach. This is conventional way of putting these electrodes on the human scalp, putting it back again, and then monitoring and finding exact location where the seizures are coming from. And what we did was we put together our team, and what we wanted to do was to really design a chip that could be planted inside the human brain. We make it completely wireless, but also MR compatible, whereby a 3D image is created, and the foci, so the point where the seizures are coming from, are really relayed to the surgeon in a tomogram, and a complete tomogram that allows the surgeon to really pinpoint where the seizures are coming from. And then the surgery could be really performed to take that particular area, and also not damaging normal tissue or using the guesswork. And then, these 3D electrodes that we have developed, they have been patented, and we are really ready to go. We have kind of regulatory clearances to be able to plant it and test it in humans. The other non-invasive approach that we are working on is these surface electrodes, whereby this student can actually control a robot, and the robot or the monkey will do exactly whatever he is doing or he's planning to do or is thinking to do. And so the idea is that you can actually use to control the lights on,
turn the green light on,
or switch off different things and off. And even young students, when they're brought into the lab, young kids, we can really within 5 minutes set them up, and they can really control these robots. But the idea really is that if you train them to control this cube in a tunnel where it goes up and down or push it back and forth, you could think about coupling it to control a robot or control a drone in space, whereby you can actually use these technologies to fly aircrafts. So this student doesn't know where the car is. She's only imagining the old footprints, and she can take the car from where it came from and actually put it back where it is. And this is all done through mind control. And then if you have more trained graduate students, it actually drives better than Google cars, so no crashes either. And you can use the same approach to be able to really fly a drone, which is mind controlled. And then little sensors can be built onto these devices that allow us to be able to feed back onto your headgear, and this in turn can provide you the echolocation, just like a bat locates its target. And then you can actually not only fly these things, but you can also land them safely. And then finally, I think what I like to see is that these virtual reality, which are again non-invasive technologies, could be used to reprogram the mind using really an augmented reality. So people who have, trauma, people who have had post-traumatic stress disorder, you could really create scenarios using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to really allow them to be able to recapitulate that scenario, albeit in a very different. And if you actually use these technologies, they are also mind altering as well. And they are rather non-invasive, but we don't know what their impact will be on the rewiring of the brain. And that's why I think they are not really fully operational. So really the take home message is that the times are really changing. We have to really continue to tap into information processing mechanisms of the brain. Now we have developed the technology and tools. We are going from non-invasive approach to more maybe a more invasive approach, and to be able to really take humanity to the next stage where we could coexist using artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will really revolutionize not only the field of medicine, but also the way things are done. Are we reaching the point of singularity? I think the only thing, the limit is your own imagination. But the important thing actually to take away before you get too excited is that, we know this, the data is not information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not wisdom. And wisdom requires conscious. And the humans are so far the only species that have conscious. But if we develop technology that allows us to tap into the limbic system of humans, you can actually design these machines to have feelings just like humans would. So, is a super intelligent AI on the horizon? I don't think that we are really that far, but do we really want to do? That's a very good question to really ask. So I think the next future, and then this is something that my job is to make you really think big, think in the future, is to be able to really think about what are the applications of these both non-invasive and invasive technologies. It can do everything, but unfortunately it can't buy you love. So I will stop at that, and I'll be happy to take any questions. I think my time is almost up.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Syed. This has been a fantastic session. I know I've seen some comments in the thread here saying it's scary and crazy and exciting all in one. I have a couple of questions here, so I'll just relay them to you. The first question I have is, do we see these technologies replacing human activities?
Absolutely. I think, they already are. When you think about Google actually knows more about you than you know about yourself. These two, I can give you my own personal examples that I was in the mall just before the lockdown, and I saw a good old friend that I hadn't seen it for like 15 years go by on the other side of the mall. And as I turned the corner, I got a message that, do you want to send him a friend request? So I think, there was this young girl in Minnesota. She used to do her shopping from Target. And all of a sudden, she's a teenager, started getting all this material about, baby products. And the father got very upset. He calls him up and says, well, what is this nonsense? You're encouraging my teenage daughter to get pregnant and have babies. She's just a teenager. A week later, he actually calls them back, says, I'm really sorry. How did you know? So, you know, these technologies that you talk about in your dinner table about, you know, buying a particular product, and then actually that ad shows up on your screen. So, you know, these technologies are indeed scary, but, you know, is Google becoming all-knowing, almighty? That's a question. But, you know, are we giving up our emotional and social intelligence to these guys? Because our biological intelligence is actually being compromised by technical intelligence. So until and unless we put up resistance, these technologies will most certainly, these approaches will most certainly hijack our mind.
So this is actually a great tie-in to the next question, because you were talking about privacy here. So the next question is, with the increase of non-tech savvy people using what can be called invasive tech, do you think there is enough awareness or issues of issues regarding privacy? And what are the privacy concerns as it relates to invasive technology?
I think it's a really a great question. You know, everything now, the money currency in Sweden, there are 4,000 people who actually have these small chips. And they are dealing with, you know, can you use it as a credit card? Yes. So I think, can somebody hack into your credit card, which is planted? So far, nobody has really done this, but is it possible? Absolutely possible. So I think, you know, your privacy, security are all on kind of very icy ground. But, you know, for most of these tools that you have, for example, if you have a small little capsule inserted in your body, you need to be very close to a transporter and to be able to read it. So other people at a distance cannot really tap into. So for example, if somebody wants to charge your credit card, they have to come very, very close and make a contact. But can it be controlled in the future using, you know, Google or using the satellites? Absolutely. So I think, you know, but I always tell people that science is nothing to be ashamed of. Even in the ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we develop technologies to make life better for human and for humanity. And I think can it be exploited for wrong purposes and reasons? Absolutely. But I think we need to, as we get to that stage, we will make sure that appropriate, you know, cybersecurity and other tools and the privacy protection is in place before these things are really made available to people.
Wonderful. So we have a question here about the videos. So the video shared earlier showed a fantasized version of what we think invasive technologies and AI can become. How far are we from that fantasized view, and what do you see as the growth trajectory and speed for invasive tech?
I think it's $1 billion question. You know that the Facebook actually used this machine learning. And when you think of Alfa Go-Zero, Alpha, which is a computer, it's a game that only human master, you know, players can play. But this computer actually trained itself to play that game. And not only that it played that game, and I show you here, not only that Alfa Go-Zero taught itself, but it defeated each and every human being in a jiffy and knocked them out. So these machines can actually learn themselves. They can program themselves, and if they can do that, they can actually make themselves as well. So they can fabricate, they don't need humans to prepare them. So, you know, Facebook did an experiment where they allowed these machines to communicate with each other, and then the machines, using its own algorithm, using artificial intelligence and machine learning tools, it said, you know, CUT, cut, BUT, but, so PUT should be put, not put. These humans have put in these wrong codes. Let's change it. So they started to change the code. And when they actually changed the code, humans couldn't figure out what they were saying. So all of a sudden, these machines went out of control. So I think they pulled the plug. So I think many cases, if we can get access to information processing capabilities of over 1 million brain cells, especially in the limbic system, these technologies will become available to you in the next 10 to 15 years. And could we reach the point of singularity? I think those are interesting questions that we have started asking ourselves as to what is conscious that is so unique to humans. Can these machines have conscious? And what would it take for them to have conscious? And if they do not make conscious decisions, I give you an example, it would be that, you know, when the world runs out of food, and then the machine will say, look, we have used the best fertilizer, best seeds, used all the lands and everything else. But now the only problem is this, exploding human population. So to solve this problem, if it doesn't have conscious, it will say eliminate this much population of humans. So will they eliminate us? Who knows? And I think, now the sky is really the limit. The level of which machine learning is really an artificial intelligence is going. In maybe next 15, 20 years, I would say we might reach the point of singularity if there are no hurdles and if we invested in terms of research dollars.
You almost gave us an Avengers Infinity War Thanos explanation there with the snap of a finger, getting rid of half of the population to make room for the rest. So that's again, AI. I've heard of this scenario here with Facebook when they, when the AIs basically went off on their own and locked out the developers. So that was fascinating to read. I have one last question here for you. And this is taking us back to the healthcare side. And it just says, with smart devices becoming an active part of our lives, like the Apple Watch or the smart health monitoring devices, how far are we from these going from just being like a monitoring device, like a health monitoring device, to being actively functional, dependable healthcare administering devices?
I think, again, a brilliant questions. Now if you look at, for example, a radiologist or image that you acquire through an MRI or CT or other devices, these artificially intelligent devices or these machine learning algorithms can actually predict and see subtleties better than humans. And sometimes the human, feeling sentiments, you're tired, how exhausted you are, could create some errors which could be really mitigated. But I think you always need humans to oversee and supersede. I always tell my training medical students when I teach them that, look, Jesus never went to medical school, he could still heal and cure. It's not really the MD degree, it's the passion and compassion that allows you to be able to actually heal. So the question is, will these machines have similar passion and compassion and attention to, the human sentiments? I don't think that will be the case. I think you still need the healthcare providers, but these things could become tools that will aid in their ability to be able to really, as a second opinion or a second guess, and then helping them really mitigating any errors and sending the doctor back to saying, I don't think this is what it really looks like. It's a rare genetic disease, and these mutations tell me that this patient may have this disorder and not what you thought of as a blanket shotgun approach. So I think, these things will have to grow with us like we have grown with the technologies, and the technologies have grown with us. But whether they are both replaceable, I don't think we can go back to the old ways. And I think that working together and then empowering ourselves to accepting these technologies will make our healthcare system better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Farooq, do you want to take it away for some closing remarks?
Yes, I think in short, what I can say is that I'm completely blown away. I am by profession a cybersecurity professional, and I spent a big part of my life in audit and compliance. All I can say is that, of course, AI is evolving at a significantly fast pace. I mean, and of course, there's so many things which are changing. You spoke about humanoids, androids, and of course, androids and humanoids performing life-saving procedures at some point in time. And of course, all this is amazing. But of course, if I look at all this from the caveat of security and privacy, there are lots of things that we need to take into account. I mean, some ethical standards, biases, and whatnot. But I think, as you mentioned, I mean, most of the large tech companies are already leveraging AI to a great extent. You just spoke about Alfa Go-Zero. Facebook, Apple, and all these big tech companies have invested billions and billions of dollars in developing bots and tools just to grow the business model. And of course, they're already leveraging this. So I think the time has come for various stakeholders in our civil society to make sure that all those standards are adhered to. And of course, the things which you are working on, Dr. Naweed Syed, I think I really hope and pray that they are brought into mainstream at some point in time, be it invasive procedures or non-invasive procedures. This was truly a learning experience for me as a student of science and as a cybersecurity professionals. And I'm sure that everybody else who attended today's session benefited a lot from that. Thank you, Dr. Naweed Syed, for a very intriguing and learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Farooq, and the rest of the team for having me. I think it was an interesting, I just wanted to make people uncomfortable.
I think you did a good job with that. Thank you.